This is the Everyday AI Show, the everyday podcast where we simplify AI and bring its power to your fingertips. Listen daily for practical advice to boost your career, business, and everyday life.
Is OpenAI now going straight after Google? Speaking of Google, how did Google actually lead to the Microsoft and OpenAI partnership? And what's going on with all of these US newspapers suing large language model makers? All right, we're going to be talking about that today and more on Everyday AI. What's going on, y'all? My name is Jordan Wilson. I'm the host of Everyday AI, and this is your guide to learning and leveraging generative AI to grow your company and to grow your career. So thank you for joining us. If you're on the podcast, we appreciate you listening. If you could leave us a review, tell your friends, whether you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or if you're joining us live, thanks for doing that. So Rolando and Dutch and Harvey and Brian and Juan and everyone else, thanks for tuning in. So every single Monday, we bring you the AI news that matters. So you could spend literally hours every single day trying to keep up with all of these new developments, all these new tools, all these new softwares and how they impact your career and your company. You could spend hours a day, or you could tune in every single Monday to Everyday AI, where we break it all down for you. We spend time doing this every single day anyways. So on Mondays, we usually give you a recap and talk about why this matters or maybe why it doesn't. So as a reminder, before we get started, if you haven't already, this is just the beginning. This is the appetizer. The main course is our newsletter. So make sure to go to youreverydayai.com and sign up for that free daily newsletter for more on today's stories and a lot more that we couldn't even fit into today's show. So if you haven't already done that, make sure to do that. And without further ado, let's get into what's going on in the world of AI news for the week of May 6th. All right, so let's start with the spicy stuff, y'all. So OpenAI is rumored to launch a new search engine based on ChatGPT technology. OpenAI is speculated to be launching a new search engine based on ChatGPT technology, potentially challenging Google's dominance in the search in the search market, and maybe kind of taking this perplexity approach. So the new search engine is rumored to focus on natural language interactions, similar to Perplexity and Google's search generative experience, aiming to provide live data through AI. So reports suggest that OpenAI may make a significant announcement on May 9th regarding this new search engine, hinting at a potential game changer in the search industry. So OpenAI CEO Sam Altman said that he believes that integrating search into ChatGPT could revolutionize the way that people find and act on information, offering a more efficient alternative to traditional search engines like Google. So the intersection of large language models and search remains unexplored territory, I'd say, for the most part, with potential for a more seamless and effective search experience for users. So this could be a strategic move actually for Microsoft, right, which reportedly owns 49% of OpenAI and is a major investor in OpenAI. And they've failed to challenge Google for search dominance, right? So it seems like no matter what, Microsoft has done with its Bing search engine over the years, they've barely been able to crack any of the share, right? So depending on what study you look at, Google has historically owned about 90 to 95% of the US search market. So this, I think, is a pretty big play that people aren't necessarily paying attention to, especially with, an analysts and a lot of enterprise users being a little underwhelmed by Google's AI offerings, including their search generative experience, which, by the way, I personally like Google's SGE, not a huge fan of their Gemini large language model. For whatever reason, Gemini has a problem talking to the internet, even though it's powered by Google. But, this one's pretty interesting. So something else that's worth noting is the timing of this, right? So May 9th is just rumors, right? Nothing has been confirmed. There is technically no announcement, but I think this is literally going to be the AI story of the week, barring anything else that comes out if this does happen, right? Not only could this be a major threat to Google, a huge, bolster to Microsoft, but it could also ultimately change the way that we all use search engines, right? If you've listened to the Everyday AI show more than once, you've probably probably heard me talk about and other guests talk about how unusable the internet is, now, and how bad search engines are, right? And how much of a time waster traditional search is, right? And it's kind of built that way, right? Search engines are built on display ads. They're built on taking you down rabbit holes. Search engines want you to click on 3, 4, 10 pages to get a result because they make more money. And so do the online publishers. So as we saw Perplexity come into the fold, a little more than a year ago, and essentially do that work for you, right? So if you haven't used Perplexity, if you're listening to the show, I highly advise you go do that now. Like, go ahead, click pause, come back later. Doesn't matter to me. But essentially, it'll look through 10, 15, 20 sources and try to do all that research for you. So this is kind of the area where OpenAI and its CEO, Sam Altman, say that they want to play. Also, the timing is very, I won't say suspicious here, but it's probably very intentional. Again, this is just a rumor, but Google does have their big I/O developer conference next week on May 14th. So that's kind of why, this May 9th date that was, first leaked out by a very famous Twitter tipster who has a highly successful track record, supposedly out of Silicon Valley, saying this May 9th date. But OpenAI CEO Sam Altman has already alluded to how OpenAI may want to have its place in the future of search in a conversation with Lex Friedman last month, and talked about cracking the code on search, but not in the way you might think. So he essentially, Sam Altman said that Google search is just showing people 10 blue links and that there might be a better way to find that information. And he did say that OpenAI is very interested in helping people find better ways and more useful ways to find that information. So he did kind of, allude to that and said that he wanted to kind of be a part of that solution. So it should be pretty interesting. And a couple things to note, are these early breadcrumbs? Maybe, but OpenAI did completely change their website design last week. And something people aren't really talking about is its focus on what looks like search. Right. So if you're on the live stream here, I'm showing you a screenshot of OpenAI's website, but it looks like Google, right? Weird, huh? So, OpenAI's website previously was, it just had a lot of information on it. It looked like a standard, landing page, right? It looked just like a tech company putting out information. So now if you go to OpenAI's website or ChatGPT's homepage, you get redirected to the same one. And essentially it's just a box that says, ask ChatGPT anything, right? So it looks very much like Google. Right? A very simplified homepage. It wants you to go in and search and to talk to it conversationally. So a couple of their key indicators pointing to why this is likely going to happen, or whether it's May 9th or next month or next quarter, I do think that this is going to happen sooner rather than later, right? So not only now do you have their homepage, which is one of the most visited websites in the world, pushing people just to use ChatGPT and just OpenAI in a conversational way, but now you don't even need an account to use ChatGPT. That's another thing that I think is definitely a nod to the direction that OpenAI is going with this, right? Just like you don't need an account to use Google, right? Go to google.com, start searching, right? So if you go to openai.com, you can start using ChatGPT, right? It's the free version, so it's not that great. It's not going to, it's really not good at actually searching the internet in a traditional way. But, I do think that this is, this new homepage design that is really geared toward looking like a search engine will lead to this, right? So again, I don't like to talk about, projections a lot on the show. I like to keep it all news-based, but this is where all the signs point. Also, some tipsters online found this, and we're constantly monitoring this site now. But they did also register a new kind of subdomain, so search.chatgpt.com. And a lot of people on the back end have been looking at ChatGPT and noticing this as well. So, this is definitely something you have to keep an eye on. Another thing, right, is there was this mysterious new large language model that was out in the wild on the chatbot arena that we talked about last week. Hey, that's why you got to like listen and watch every single day, y'all, because we cover this so you don't have to spend hours doing it. But there was a mysterious model that was, reportedly from OpenAI. It was kind of available for people to quote unquote play with and to test for about 2 days, and then it was taken down off this the chat board arena. And ultimately, what a lot of people believe this is it was called GPT-2 dash chatbot. And a lot of people said, "Oh, this is the next version of GPT 4.5 or it's GPT 5." And I said, "No, I don't think so." You know what? I ultimately thought it was one of two things, but one of them might lend it to being used for a potential search engine. So it did appear to be a much smaller model, not a trillion parameter model. And why that's important is if you start offering a service like this, if like a Perplexity, right, or a ChatGPT, right? If you start offering a service like this, you have to have a new, more powerful model that takes up less compute, right? In a recent trend, we've seen this with Meta's Llama, with Microsoft's Phi 3, right? You've seen these very recent, over the last couple of months, these recent models that are much smaller and very powerful and focused on high quality data and just human fine tuning, right? Which is important because if ChatGPT were to offer a service like this and they were to essentially really go this Google route, right? Presumably more and more people are going to be using it, and they have to have a way to kind of convert people from free users to signing up, right? So people who aren't even signed up to go into ChatGPT, use it like Google. Oh, I like this. So at least I want to sign up for a free account so I can save my searches, right? Because if you don't have a free account, you can't save your searches. So that piece is big. I think that this new GPT-2 chatbot model may be the new free version of ChatGPT. So, maybe they're going to phase out this 3.5, which isn't very good, and maybe use this new GPT-2 chatbot version, which has a knowledge cutoff of November 2023. So integrating that with Browse with Bing, I think that's what we could be looking at. Again, it's conjecture right now, but it looks like that's where all the signs are pointing. All right. Don't want to spend too much time on that. So we have actually so much Microsoft and OpenAI news this week, but let's now talk a little bit about these newspapers, right? Why are these newspapers suing OpenAI and others? Are you still running in circles trying to figure out how to actually grow your business with AI? Maybe your company has been tinkering with large language models for a year or more, but can't really get traction to find ROI on Gen AI. Hey, this is Jordan Wilson, host of this very podcast. Companies like Adobe, Microsoft, and NVIDIA have partnered with us because they trust our expertise in educating the masses around generative AI to get ahead. And some of the most innovative companies in the country hire us to help with their AI strategy and to train hundreds of their employees on how to use Gen AI. So whether you're looking for ChatGPT training for thousands or just need help building your front-end AI strategy, you can partner with us too, just like some of the biggest companies in the world do. Go to youreverydayai.com/partner to get in contact with our team, or you can just click on the partner section of our website. We'll help you stop running in those AI circles and help get your team ahead and build a straight path to ROI on Gen AI. Well, let's talk about it. So major newspapers in the US are suing OpenAI and Microsoft. So this lawsuit has been filed against OpenAI and Microsoft for alleged copyright infringement. So a group of 8 US newspapers, including the New York Daily News and the Chicago Tribune, is suing OpenAI and Microsoft for using copyrighted news articles without permission or payment to train their AI chatbots. So the newspapers claim that OpenAI and Microsoft have been using, quote, millions of their articles to build their businesses without compensating them. OpenAI has stated that they are engaged in partnerships with news organizations to address concerns and to provide solutions. The lawsuit is a part of series of copyright lawsuits against OpenAI and Microsoft, with authors like John Grisham and media outlets also filing similar claims. Tech companies are essentially arguing, though, that using publicly accessible internet content to train AI systems falls under the fair use doctrine of American copyright law, even though the content is copyrighted. So OpenAI, it's worth noting, in the past couple of months has struck up a lot of huge licensing deals with various media companies, including the Associated Press, Axel Springer, Prisa Media, Le Monde, and the Financial Times, among others. But these lawsuits highlight the ongoing debates surrounding the use of copyrighted content by tech companies for AI training and its implications in the media industry's intellectual property rights and the fair use of digital content. Also, it brings attention to the need for clear guidelines and arguments between content creators and AI developers to ensure fair compensation and ethical practices in the evolving landscape of artificial intelligence technology. So more or less, if you're, let me just super simplify it for you. But for the most part, large language models just scrape the entire internet and use all of that data to train their models, right? And guess what? I won't say an overwhelming majority, but a lot of that content is obviously copyrighted. So, whether we think that this is right or wrong, it doesn't matter. But, copyright law is it's kind of on the title card, right? Like, this is going to be being debated in courtrooms throughout the United States and throughout the rest of the world to say, hey, what does copyright law even mean anymore, right? If it's out there on the internet, regardless of if it's copyrighted material, a lot of these, companies such as OpenAI are saying, nope, we're going to go ahead. We're going to train our model on all of this information. And we're going to go down this fair use doctrine. And in the meantime, also strike up huge, multi-million dollar partnerships with content agencies. So this does become less of a worry in the future. Also, what's really important to talk about and understand here is the New York Times case. Okay, so this is extremely important. So the New York Times sued OpenAI and Microsoft back in December 2023. It's still ongoing. So the OpenAI tried to get the lawsuit dismissed a couple months ago, didn't happen. But the New York Times is alleging that OpenAI and Microsoft infringed on their copyright and used millions of their articles without permission, right, to train their models. And the New York Times is seeking an unspecified amount, but we're talking billions of dollars in damages. So yeah, billions with a B. So this one's interesting. And, I've talked about this here on the show multiple times before. This is the first big domino to fall, right? This New York Times versus OpenAI lawsuit. I actually think it is going to impact how we consume information for the foreseeable future, right? A lot more than we may think. In theory, this could go to trial. I don't think it will actually go to trial. I don't see how it is in anyone's best interest for this for this to go to trial. I do think that ultimately this will be settled out of court with a settlement. But I don't see, if I'm being honest, I don't see how OpenAI and Microsoft win this lawsuit. I do think the New York Times made so many mistakes, which, had a whole hour-long podcast going over piece by piece, bit by bit, line by line of the New York Times case, which was, I think, shoddy at best. They did not do a very good job presenting their evidence in the court case, but that's beside the point. But I really don't see any other way that this ends except for a settlement being reached. And then what does happen, right? So now you've kind of seen this second wave of newspapers, some pretty big names in the fold there with the New York Post and the Chicago Tribune. So those are two of the top 10 newspapers in the U.S. kind of falling in line after this New York Times. So I've talked about this on the show many times, but expect to see a ton of lawsuits, especially once we get word of what is happening with the New York Times, OpenAI. And maybe, who knows, but y'all, the news industry is extremely tight, extremely close. So when I did see this story last week and we talked about it on the show, I immediately thought, okay, does someone there in the know that something is coming down the pipeline with this big New York Times versus OpenAI and Microsoft lawsuit? maybe, right? If there's people who find, leaks or who can, get scoops on, information and where stories are heading, it's journalists, right? Like the former journalist in me says that, but that's kind of how the world works, right? Journalists, and for the most part, are always the people breaking the story. So you also have to think or wonder to say, okay, does this mean that someone at one of those, 8 major newspapers knows, right? Do they have connections at the New York Times, at the New York Times publishing company, knowing which way that this lawsuit is ultimately going? Because these things could take months, quarters, or years to finally settle, or if anything does actually go to trial. So pretty interesting there on the timing of everything. I honestly did not expect any other big name publications to kind of launch their lawsuits, but they'll all be launching lawsuits, right? Literally, like if a company out there does not yet have a content partnership with an OpenAI, with a Google, with an Anthropic, et cetera, they're probably going to be suing them, right? So we're going to probably see dozens or hundreds of these big name lawsuits from newspapers, news organizations, content publishers, et cetera, in the coming months. But it was kind of interesting to me that this one came before there was any big news on the OpenAI versus New York Times. So you have to think that there might be something in the coming weeks or months coming out of that case, which should be pretty interesting. All right, our next piece of AI news, which, hey, I'm human. I actually think I forgot to put the slide in here. So for our live stream audience, just follow along. But how did the Microsoft and OpenAI partnership actually happen? Was part of it a fear of Google? Well, maybe. So new European Union investigation has shown that Microsoft's involvement in OpenAI might have been from a little bit fear of Google. All right. So the European Union is currently investigating Microsoft's investment in OpenAI, and that has prompted the release of emails from Microsoft highlighting Microsoft's concerns about Google's AI dominance. So an email from Microsoft CTO Kevin Scott emphasized the urgency for Microsoft to advance in AI, particularly in natural language processing, to keep up with Google's advancements. So the email at the time was sent to Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella and Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates, highlighting Microsoft's lag in AI compared to OpenAI and Google. So this email was from 2019. So in the email, Scott acknowledged that maybe Microsoft underestimated the infrastructure investments made by Google and OpenAI in their AI developments. So this reportedly, according to this emails, was a big key in Microsoft's eventual substantial investments in OpenAI, reportedly totaling between $11 billion and $13 billion. And that has really propelled development in this generative AI technology. Notably, the widely used ChatGPT chatbot and Microsoft's Copilot offering now, which is bringing generative AI to the desktop, which is largely based on OpenAI's GPT-4 model, right? So this is pretty interesting when this story came out. Essentially Microsoft saying about 5 years ago, like, hey, we're behind. Look at what Google is doing. Look at what OpenAI is doing. We are not doing enough. So, obviously, this has led to the integration inside of Microsoft's products for a lot of OpenAI and GPT-4 led products, including, their Browse with Bing, GitHub, Microsoft 365 products, etc. So it's going to be interesting to follow this kind of investigation and what ultimately becomes of this European Union investigation into Microsoft's investment in OpenAI. Because the outcome holds significance beyond just the involved companies, potentially reshaping the trajectory of AI research and development on a global scale. What's also interesting, if you look at just that blip in time on the radar in 2019, and then you fast forward to today, and you have to wonder if that email was never sent, right? If Microsoft never would have made this substantial investment, reportedly giving them a 49% ownership stake in OpenAI. So you have to think, well, what would have happened if that never would have happened, right? But Right now, if you're a Microsoft shareholder, you're probably pretty thankful that it has happened because a lot of analysts and smart people have said that, a lot of what Microsoft has been able to accomplish over the last year or two, and a lot of their success has come from their investment into generative AI technologies and a pretty successful rollout of their Copilot offerings across their Microsoft 365 suite of products, right? And also interesting, since 2019, Microsoft's stock is up more than 220% since those emails were revealed. And that is far outpacing the growth of, Google and their parents company, Alphabet's stock during the same time. So yes, Google is growing. It's still one of the largest companies in the world. But hey, right now, I would say Google is chasing Microsoft, right? Which, we just talked about Google's search dominance, but you probably wouldn't have thought maybe 5 years ago that Microsoft would be in the position that they are today. And maybe a lot of it does stem from some of those emails. All right, let's keep this going. So this is some new news, right? Sometimes we kind of recap the news for the week, but the Biden administration has just allocated $285 million for semiconductor digital twin development. All right, so the Biden administration is set to fund efforts enhancing semiconductor manufacturing through digital twins, virtual models for testing, and optimizing physical objects and systems. So the funding totals $285 million, will support research into semiconductor digital twin development, combined physical and digital facilities, industry demonstration projects, workforce training, and the establishment of the CHIPS Manufacturing U.S. Institute. All right, so advancements in semiconductor digital twin technology supported by this funding can potentially lead to a lot of AI-driven innovations in chip development, manufacturing processes, and collaborative design efforts within the semiconductor industry. The funding is part of the CHIPS and Science Act of 2022, which is a $280 billion bill aimed at boosting domestic semiconductor manufacturing. So you can't really talk about this huge piece of news, $285 million essentially for digital twins, without quickly talking about what are digital twins and how are they being used right now in AI. Well, it's hard to talk about digital twins without talking about NVIDIA, right? And when you talk about semiconductors, you can't not talk about NVIDIA, right? So essentially, if we're going to oversimplify it here, y'all, but generative AI needs a lot of compute. It needs a lot of computer power, right? And a lot of these are highly specialized and highly specific GPU chips that NVIDIA is leading in, right? So the rest of the semiconductor industry has been scrambling over the last couple of years as NVIDIA has gone from a relatively unknown, video game graphics company to one of the biggest companies and one of the most important companies in the world, right? Depending on which day you look at it, they're normally a top 3 to top 4 company by market cap here in the United States, right? After not even being, a top 30 company about 4 years ago. So this does, this move from the Biden White House does signal kind of the increased need for other companies to stay competitive as well, because right now, a lot of the other semiconductor, companies here in the U.S. and otherwise are struggling to keep up with NVIDIA. So I do think that this move partially is to bolster competitiveness here in the U.S., which will ultimately and hopefully drive down prices, right? Because right now, if you're a big generative AI company, or if you're just an enterprise company really wanting to incorporate generative AI into your offerings, you got to have a lot of money, right? A single, Blackwell GPU is not going to do anything. You're probably looking at a 7 to 8 figure investment if you really want to get generative AI, going at an enterprise company. So this move is pretty big. And also just talking about digital twins, right? If you don't know digital twins, those aren't just avatars, of yourself. And it's like, oh, that's an AI talking. No, digital twin, essentially think of it as a city. Or a manufacturing plant, right? So that's before you spend, hundreds of millions of dollars or maybe billions of dollars building, a giant new facility, huge pieces of infrastructure. Essentially, a digital twin environment allows you, again, you have to use a lot of, generative AI powered by these very powerful GPUs, but it essentially allows you to simulate everything millions and millions of times in a digital twin environment. So think of it literally like a city, right? I live in Chicago. So in theory, a city could come in and create a digital twin of Chicago, and they could run simulations millions of times a day, and find different ways to improve energy, find different ways to improve, highways, find different ways to improve infrastructure, et cetera, right? But you need a lot of compute power. So this kind of news from the Biden administration might not sound like a lot, because it's like, all right, well, whatever this semiconductor digital twin development is. But for the US government to be investing nearly $300 million into essentially digital twins is a pretty big development. All right, our next piece of AI news that matters for the week, as I take a sip of water, Warren Buffett has warned of AI threats at the annual shareholders conference for Berkshire Hathaway. So famed investor Warren Buffett, during the annual Berkshire Hathaway shareholders conference, compared the rise of AI to the dangers of nuclear weapons, expressing concerns about its potential impact. Pretty big shift there, Warren, but we'll talk about that here in a second. So Buffett highlighted the significance of AI, acknowledging its importance and the potential for both good and harm. So the Berkshire CEO shared his unease after encountering a video generated by AI using his likeness. Yeah, we were just talking about digital twins, but there we're talking deep fakes. After encountering a video generated by AI using his likeness to deliver a message he never conveyed, raising fears of potential scams in the future. So despite recognizing AI's vast potential, Buffett admitted his lack of understanding about the technology and its unpredictable outcomes. So this highly anticipated conference in Omaha, Nebraska is known as the Woodstock for Capitalists. And it featured Buffett alongside a couple other vice chairs, where they discussed Berkshire's financial standing and future prospects. Here's a hot take. Well, I'm glad that, finally Buffett admitted his lack of understanding about the technology and its unpredictable outcomes, because previously, in previous years, Warren Buffett has really underplayed what generative AI and what AI is actually capable of. I think it was more than a year ago. He, essentially said that this large language model and generative AI technology was extraordinary, but wasn't sure if it was beneficial. And the beneficial is in quote, right? Which is asinine to me, to think that someone as smart as Warren Buffett, even a year ago, could look at large language models and generative AI technology. And even at that time, right? We've talked about it here on the show as well. The Magnificent Seven, especially minus Tesla. So, 6 of the largest companies in the US have been pulling the weight of the entire US economy at, ways we've literally have never seen before in the history of the world, right? So the fact that Warren Buffett, it took him this long to finally realize, oh, okay, yeah, this AI technology actually might be pretty good, and it might be so good it's kind of scary, right? Yeah, because, a year ago he was singing a completely different tune, kind of talking about AI that it was, just a toy. He said, it's extraordinary, but not sure if it's beneficial. Yeah, it's beneficial, and it's changing the way we all work. So it's good to see that, Warren Buffett may finally be on board, but it just took a deep fake of him to realize just how quote unquote beneficial generative AI technology is. All right, our next piece of AI news that matters is Eli Lilly scientists have just said that generative AI will be help discovering drugs. All right. So scientists at Eli Lilly just recently said that the use of generative AI led to the discovery of novel drug candidates with, quote, weird looking structures that traditional methods missed. So if you don't know, Eli Lilly is a pharmaceutical giant that specializes in developing and producing medications to treat various health conditions. So this article just came out, but said scientists were surprised by the AI generated decisions, sparking creativity and opening new pathways in medicine development. So the field of AI in healthcare is moving toward completely AI generated medicines in the near future, which is wild to think about, right? And when people say, oh, generative AI technology, can't, create new intelligence. Well, this just goes to show you, yeah, it can. This is one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world saying that large language models and generative AI will ultimately lead to discovering new medicines that human scientists have not been able to discover. Also, I mean, you can't talk about this without talking about Google's DeepMind's AlphaFold breakthrough in 2021, as that marked a pivotal moment in applying AI to biology, revolutionizing drug development and design. What's also interesting here is Eli Lilly scientists talked about hallucinations and how hallucinations in this case are actually a good thing, in that hallucination. So when a large language model maybe doesn't quite understand and it kind of goes off the rails, they're talking about, hey, hallucinations may actually, in large language models, may actually help us discover, or it might help us lead to the discovery of new medicines or new breakthroughs in medical technology that we didn't know before, or that we couldn't see before. So they did talk about AI's ability to hallucinate new drugs by exploring a vast number of proteins could lead to groundbreaking discoveries, right? So we talk about hallucinations like they're a bad thing. And, for the most part, they are, unless you are using hallucinations intentionally. So we've talked about that here on the show before. But I do think that that is a pretty important piece, right? And how, yes, generative AI and large language models are technology that can create new intelligence, because when you can run, just like we talked about, running, millions of simulations in a digital twin environment. This is what medical companies are doing with protein discovery, with medicine, right? When you can run at a very high level, and as these generative AI models get smarter and smarter and more capable, when you can run millions of simulations in literally a fraction of the time that it would take, even if you brought together all of the world's best and brightest scientific minds, you can accomplish so much more with generative AI models, right? Like we've had, large tech and pharmaceutical leaders in the world come on this very show and say as much. So I do think, even like you might look at this and kind of laugh it off, like, hallucinations aren't going to lead to new drugs. Well, yeah, they are. They're definitely going to lead to new drugs. Generative AI and large language models, and the ability to essentially have an unlimited amount of resources, of, all of the top knowledge in the world, and to be able to, run that at scale is extremely exciting for the future of medicine. All right. That's not it. Well, that's it for today. Hey, love what Cecilia said here, and thanks for our live stream audience for joining, saying hallucinations often equal extrapolations, which generate innovations. Man, I can't speak today, y'all. But I want to know what you think of this AI news. So if you are on the podcast, we always put in an email, like my email, my LinkedIn. Let me know, what do you think of this AI news? And just to recap, because there was a lot. So here's the AI news that matters. We're looking at OpenAI and ChatGPT potentially releasing a search engine maybe as soon as this week. We have some new information from this European Union that's investigating Microsoft's investment in OpenAI, and some emails kind of saying it was their original fear of Google. The Biden administration allocating $285 million for semiconductor and digital twin development. 8 more major U.S. newspapers suing ChatGPT's OpenAI and Microsoft. Warren Buffett finally saying, oh, yes, this AI is actually very capable and it might be a threat. So talking about that at the annual Berkshire Hathaway conference, and researchers from Eli Lilly recognizing the extraordinary power of generative AI when it comes to helping them find, develop, and discover new medicines. All right. I hope this was helpful. If it was, hey, leave me a comment. If you could, share this with your friends as well, right? We spend hours literally every single day going through what's happening in the world of AI, bringing on experts, putting out tutorials to help you grow your company and to grow your career. So if this is helpful, it takes about 5 seconds to, tag a friend. If you're on LinkedIn, click that repost button. Or if you're listening on the podcast, please leave us a review, rating, or tell your friends. All right. Thank you for tuning in. We hope to see you back tomorrow and every day for more Everyday AI. Thanks, y'all.
And that's a wrap for today's edition of Everyday AI. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a rating. It helps keep us going. For a little more AI magic, visit youreverydayai.com and sign up to our daily newsletter so you don't get left behind. Go break some barriers, and we'll see you next time.